Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, and welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. I hope you and yours are all well. It's been another incredible 7 days, and we've got lots to talk about, so let me, without further ado, bring in the crew. We've got poetry there for you. Over there in Edinburgh, we've got Lloyd Quinnan. Lloyd,
hi,
how are
Rory,
you?
how you doing?
Good, you?
Yeah, great, yeah.
Excellent. And up there, we've got our favourite lawyer, none other than Eva Comrie. Eva, how are you? Oh, Eva's changed her mind. No? Where are you, Eva? Well, while we're waiting, Eva coming back, we've got up there in the City of Discovery, Mr. Petrie. Yeah, well, we've nearly got Mr. Petrie. We're running some good stuff this morning. And while we're trying to, Alan's trying to get his camera switched on, let's bring in our man in Brussels, who's, I think, in France, not Brussels. Where are you today, Mr. Boswell? Hello, Alan. You made it.
Yeah, I'm not too far from the French border, but I'm at SHAPE, which is Supreme Headquarters Allies Powers Europe, visiting some friends, party a little bit.
Are those friends in Supreme Command Allied NATO?
Yep.
Oh dear.
Well, it's the kind of work I do.
Right, and we still, is Eva's about somewhere. We know she's up in Fife, I believe. Is it Fife? There we go. We've got Alan. Well, while we're waiting and Eva coming in, I'd just like to say, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to give special mention to two Scots lads who have part of Napoli's Scudetto Serie A winning team. First time, I believe Lloyd's got more information about it, the first time since 1907, when Lloyd was still at school, has there been two Scotsmen in a winning Serie A team. Is that right, Lloyd?
1902, apparently, there were two Scots in the Juventus team that won the Scudetto that particular year. But what I think is absolutely marvellous about all of this is we have two players, Billy Gilmore and the great Scott McTominay, in the team that won the Italian league. Yeah, after getting dumped by Manchester United. And how well are they doing? Not particularly well. Great stuff.
Yeah, another one we failed to mention while we're waiting, Eva, really killing time here, is of course Lewis Ferguson, who's also won the top midfield player of the year in Italy as well. So we've got a heck of a midfield, folks, going into the next couple of games, which is next week, of course. Meanwhile, I'll wait on Eva arriving, but let's get started right away. Let's not hang about because there's so much to talk about. Now, Lloyd, in the last 7 days, while we were recording last week, in fact, and Phil was up at the SSRG, Professor Robert Black, KC, a renowned academic and emeritus professor, I think, at Edinburgh University of Law, announced quite spectacularly that he now does believe that Scotland is a colony, that in 1707 Scotland was extinguished, as David Mundell told us during the independence referendum, but England wasn't. So therefore, Scotland is, in fact, a de facto colony of England.
It's great news. I mean, especially coming from Robert Black, who has such a great reputation. He's was a Queen's Counsel, is a King's Counsel, emeritus professor of law at Edinburgh University, the man who stood by Abdul McGrahy during the Lockerbie trial. But I think effectively what he's done is he sent a wind blowing through the corridors of the legal profession in Scotland, most especially the Faculty of Advocates and indeed the Signet Library, because there has always been debate amongst more academic, I would say, lawyers about the nature of the Treaty of Union and the Act of Union. And many over the years have suggested that maybe it wasn't quite as it has been presented to us. But now that Robert Black has given us his what I would suggest is a definitive analysis of what actually happened in 1707, 1708, is going to cause much gnashing of teeth, and let's hope the proper extension within the law faculties of our universities, a new approach to Scottish constitutional law. Over the years, we know very well that between 1792 and 1798, English law was imported into Scotland for the trials of the Friends of the People and the United Scotsmen, Thomas Hardy, and Thomas Muir rather, and Hardy and Baird. All of these people were tried and sentenced under English law, with the connivance, indeed, of a very famous Scottish judge called Lord Braxfield. Now, what Robert Black has done is he has opened up a whole new world of examination. Here we can begin to look at our past history, the failures of the failures to actually meet the terms of the Act of Union. And I think if any smart law department is listening, or any smart law department was listening to Robert Black last Sunday, then what they should be doing is certainly creating new courses that examine the state and the constitutional history and the constitutional state of Scotland as it is today. And I wish I was a 19-year-old going to law school this year. If these were the things that were open to us, then it gives us a whole new approach where we can attach and approach the world in the way that we should have done, because Scots law is unique in itself. It's unique in the world. It's a product of our own country. And the reality is, what Robert Black said is true, that the Union is not what it claims to be. It was a takeover of our country. It was the annexation of our country with a slight tweak and nothing more. Nothing in England changed. Everything in Scotland did. The sovereignty of our people was lost in the Union, and what we need and require now is a return of that sovereignty to the people. And good on SSRG for having created the conference that allowed this fantastic news to emerge.
Yeah, and I would like to say, just like you, I too would like to be a 19-year-old. While going to university, though. Well, I've got better plans if I was 19. Anyway, Phil, you in fact were a representative up there at the SSRG at that moment. Quite a historical moment. The atmosphere must have been good when he made his speech. How did you take it all?
It was absolutely wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. Loved it. Obviously saw lots of worthies there, Sarah and Alf, Baird, friends, and this guy, obviously Craig Murray, fantastic. Craig out of everybody sees the bigger picture right enough, but this guy, very, very carefully spoken, chose his words as you would expect, very carefully. But so I heard Sarah and Alf, but I had to go to, before he spoke, and of course the excellent Craig Murray, because it's stuff to do. See a mate in hospital, but I've obviously watched it since, and I would urge everybody to watch this on the SSRG site. It was fabulous, and well done to the guys at SSRG. Good job. But basically, what Craig Murray did, summarised it in a nutshell. He says, yeah, this process will take years, and we need to continue to win political elections. He even said it on our programme, to give efficacy to any decision we eventually get. In fact, the reality is that we, the people of Scotland, don't need this decision to gain independence. The political way is always the way to win. Just look at Northern Ireland, not guns. Forget that, it's the ballot box. And what the highly esteemed Professor Black stated was that while the Scottish legislative ceased to be, the English one remained the same. And other than the addition of a minority of some new representatives from Scotland, there was no new all-encompassing United Kingdom legislative institution created, as you would expect under the circumstances. An early quote he used was fascinating, was from the Speaker of the House, John Smith of Andover, who continued as Speaker when the Scots arrived, as nothing changed for the English. This English speaker said, "We have catched the Scotland and will bind her fast," which they duly did. He went on to point out that the day the Scots joined, the English Parliament continued exactly as it had the day before we arrived. There was no change. The legislation under process continued under process, etc. Then he went on to speak on how the executive government and Acts of Scotland were abolished, but the English executive government continued unchanged. Went on to talk about how pre-treaties with other nations that Scotland had ceased to be in 1707, but England's all continued. On to speak about the monarch taking control of the UK, as it were, a continuation of England. And the ambassadors of England did not feel the need to represent the credentials, as it were, as an ambassador of a new rising nation would, but not of England, of a United Kingdom. Didn't feel it was required because it wasn't the reality. So we went on and into a lot of details on what happened and concluded that no honest lawyer could look at what happened after the first decade of the Act of Union and conclude that the states of Scotland and England ceased to be in 1707 and instead they became the UK. That did not happen. The facts show that Scotland ceased to exist and England continued, simply absorbing Scotland. Critically, he concluded, we are not a union, but rather we are absorbed by England and having our resources exploited by England. So, how do we go about this? It was a great judgment, phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal to get someone of that
It was
stature.
an opinion. It wasn't a judgment. It was an opinion.
Yeah, but he is a judge, and he adjudged. Okay, yeah, he wasn't a judgment officially, but phenomenal. So how do we go about this? Well, it's simple. We unite behind a cause that everyone does their bit. The boffins boffinate, the activists activate, the politicians politicise, the unifiers unify, but all the while the ball bags bofficate, and the SNP continues to procrastinate. And that, dear friends, as my grandmother often said, is the thief of time. Hence 11 years since the referendum. But what all seasoned politics and politicians and diplomacy advocates know is that we need to keep winning elections, and that the process that Salvo, SSRG and the like are going through will take years. And in of itself, it is not enough to win us our freedom. We must take, and I look forward to that day, you see, we don't need this decision from the UN to take our country back, but to give this decision when it comes, and I'm delighted to see that it's coming, all praise again to SSRG, Salvo and the like, we need the political apparatchik to execute it. And as Craig Murray himself stated on this show, this means continuing to win elections.
Yeah. And it continues to mean liberate Scotland while it's existing. Eva, of course, our Professor Black, was showing what a youngster you are. He was actually one of your lecturers when you were going through the rigmarole to become an actual solicitor, correct?
That's right. I left home in Alva in 1980 at the age of 17 to go to Edinburgh Uni to do my law degree, and Professor Robert Black, KC, was one of my very first lecturers. Very memorable experience listening to him teaching us, and a real privilege to be taught by somebody who hasn't just got one of the sharpest legal minds in the world, but he's one of the most courageous lawyers I've ever come across. And for him to stick his head above the parapet and provide us with this opinion is absolutely fantastic. I mean, I'm not going to say it's worth the wait, but in a way it's worth its weight in gold. But his title is For England, Nothing Changed. And that's the thing, as Phil has set out, we've got to remember that for England, they just took us over. And Professor Black refers to how for 60 years he's been involved in the law of Scotland as a student, a practising advocate, a law reformer, a teacher, an encyclopedia editor and a part-time sheriff. And for more than 59 of those years, he believed that as a result of the Treaty of Union and the acts of the Scottish and English Parliament that followed, both Scotland and England ceased to exist as states and were replaced by a new state, the United Kingdom of Great Britain. And then he narrates and he pulls apart all the reasons why that view is actually flawed. And he creates this analogy of a company and talk of a takeover or a merger. And he says, well, think about it. A merger is usually a mutual agreement. A takeover can be friendly or hostile. What does it feel like? Well, he leaves that to other people to decide, but ultimately he says Scotland's legal status is not that of a partner in a union. It's unequal perhaps, but a union nonetheless. Its status is of a territory absorbed into a larger country, a territory with limited self-government, and as Phil quoted, with its resources exploitable and exploited by the larger country for its own benefit and purposes. And he says, what consequences can and should flow from the recognition and acceptance of Scotland's true legal status as a non-self-governing territory is for others to say. So he's set out the legal framework, which is utterly and completely flawless, in my opinion, and I'm looking forward to other dignitaries and very intelligent, sharp legal minds either concurring with Professor Black or pointing out where he's wrong, because I can't find a flaw anywhere in any of his reasoning. Any criticism of it is political criticism, it's not legal criticism, and that's the difference. And you know, it's a proud day when you graduate as a lawyer and you start working, what have you. But I've never been prouder in my profession than when I read that the other day. And I messaged Professor Black to say thank you so much, because this is a game changer. And make no mistake about it, when you've got somebody as preeminent as Professor Black, KC, saying these things, he's saying what other people are thinking. And these are the movers and the shakers that will help Scotland come back into the international stage again. And everybody's got a part to play, whether it's Salvo, SSRG, the ISP, the SNP, ALPA, Eye for Eye, SS, every single political activist in Scotland, every member of the population has a part to play. No matter how big or how small, it's a duty incumbent on everybody who believes in independence and self-determination, freedom and the rule of law to do your bit. And if we do our bit properly and we unite and shake hands with the people that you don't like, that you've never had any time for, that you can't be bothered with, that you would never socialise with, and they'll never be your pals, doesn't matter if you hate their guts. Get on with them for the sake of the future of our country and for those bairns suffering unnecessarily in Scotland today, for the pensioners suffering unnecessarily, for the young single men who feel like they're on the scrap heap, for the homeless, for the downtrodden, for those that are having to cash in their pensions to pay for artificial hips or knees or whatever the hell it is, for all of these people and for the bairns yet to be born. Get your shoulder to the wheel and do all you can for every single political activist and every single person standing in next year's election for independence. And we will make this a revolution in Scotland at the ballot box by voting for independence next year with unity and lawfully, democratically. Is what Scotland needs. Because remember, with the Act of Union, for England, nothing changed. For Scotland, everything changed. And it's time to right that wrong.
Hear, hear. It can't be stressed enough, Alan, how brave this is of, I mean, the Law Society. Oh, Alan's telling me he's having trouble hearing us. Well, while Alan's getting sorted, if I could come back to you in that way, the bravery of Robert Black cannot be stressed enough. I mean, the law fraternity, dare I say, in Scotland is conservative with a small c. To break ranks is a real brave thing, but also Martin Geisler of the BBC, who's another one I want to doff my hat to, and I've done it a couple of times and I'll do it again. When he said British politicians in front of him, unionists, he has asked the question, is it a voluntary union? And they all stutter, stammer, and stammered, because they don't want to answer that question, because this, as the professor's shown, it's not a voluntary union. It's a capture. I can't hear you now. You've gone quid?
Possibly a quid, but you owe me a quid for calling me the weatherman earlier. I took my hat off to Martin Geisler. I was fortunate enough to work on a documentary series with Martin in the mid-90s on STV. Martin's an excellent reporter, and the reason he's an excellent reporter is he sees both sides. His own personal views he keeps to himself. Many people may accuse him of having personal views, and that they may well be true. But the fact is, he asks that question of each and every one because he knows himself that they do not want to answer that question. And I think to some degree he's vindicated by that. But back to Robert Black, we've always, over the many, since the years of the Union, there have been effectively what would be termed in the past rebel lawyers. The most famous of them, obviously, is Thomas Muir of Hunters Hill. who was sentenced for treason and sent to Australia in 1794. Now, what Robert has done is he's taken up the mantle of the likes of Thomas More. And what he's done is something which maybe it's because he you know, as he says himself, nearly 60 years he believed the opposite of what he now believes. And that maybe is a product of the groupthink that happens in certain elements of the Scottish legal profession. And that groupthink is a product of one thing and one thing only, and that is the unionist control of our politics. It's interesting that here we are 25, 26 years after the creation of the Scottish Parliament, and generally speaking, there is a more pro-Scotland approach from the legal profession than there ever has been before. And maybe that is because the break of the stranglehold of the unionist parties in Scotland. You know, your future employment is now no longer dependent on what the Tory party or the Labour Party think of you. That has broken. And let's hope that as a result of this, some of the other brighter and slightly younger lawyers and advocates in this country will actually begin to see themselves and take the responsibility that they should have for protecting and defending the unique qualities of Scots law. In some ways, over the years, I've found it very strange that so many of the people I've met in the legal profession are so proud of the fact that we have this unique code in the world. But then when it came to the political manifestation of that unique code, they ran in the opposite direction. Maybe Robert Black has opened the door for them to be able to run in the right direction now and understand that they have a responsibility, like those of us who are involved in politics. They have a responsibility too to defend the integrity, the independence and the unique nature of Scots law. And the only way to do that in reality, to be able to provide a platform for that in the world, is as an independent country. And let's hope that maybe during the next few months, we'll maybe have some members of the legal profession will stand alongside Liberate Scotland and Indie for Indie and make next year's election the independence election that it can be, but it only can be if all of us unite together, create enough and sufficient pressure on the Scottish National Party to rediscover its roots and rediscover its mission, which is the achievement of statehood for our country.
Absolutely. Alan, can you hear me now? Are you?
Yes.
Excellent. There we got him. So, Alan, this is monumental. And as someone who's very much involved in the grassroots, do you see this filtering through to the grassroots and re-enthusiasing, giving re-enthusiasm? I can't get the word out. Making them happy again. Yeah, you know.
Yeah, I mean, for a long time now, the grassroots have had their heads down. They've not seen anything in the distant future or what could happen for independence. This judgment from a man who we have to remember didn't believe at the beginning. He didn't believe we were colonised, but he did something that a lot of people don't do. He went and did his own investigation. He went through the history. He went through all the legal aspects of this, and he has come up to the conclusion that yes, we are a colonised nation. England has just taken over us. We didn't sign a treaty in 1707. The Parcel Rogues signed a contract when they sold us off for their pieces of silver. That's what happened. And if you look at throughout the years, slowly but surely, they have been taking small bits away from us. Our legal profession has been getting diluted because although we have a totally different legal system from England, the English court is the one who decides what happens in this island. They are the ones who have the overall supremacy. We have in this island 4 parliaments: Scottish Parliament, Welsh Parliament, Northern Irish Parliament, and the English Parliament, who again make all the decisions for every other parliament in this nation. So we are definitely colonised, and it is great news, and it's put the fire back in so many people's bellies that they have now had a prominent solicitor who has come forward and admitted that under his investigation, very thorough investigation, that he could only come up with the conclusion that Scotland is a colonised nation. And I hope very soon that people like Professor Robert Black can leave out the KC at the end of their name and bring in Scottish Council at the end of their name. And everybody should remember, if we all get together, we will be able to say loud and proud, we are Liberate Scotland, and we will be free.
Hear, hear. Because just to make a point, Phil, we have a Secretary of State for Scotland, we have a Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, we have a Secretary of State for Wales. Let me think, what's missing, Phil? Everyone's going to have to give me a quid today.
I unmuted. I muted there because there was a bit of background noise. I forgot I'd done that.
Still owe me a quid.
Well, that's it.
Don't weasel
That's
out.
Liberate Scotland up a quid. That'll do. No complaints there. I still owe you 20 from the kind donation at SSRG that I received, so
Good.
I'll have to get that into the pot as well. Right, if you're talking about about Mr. Ian Murray, is that what you're talking about?
No,
here?
I'm talking about there's a Secretary of State for Northern Ireland, there's a Secretary of State for Scotland, there's a Secretary of State for Wales, but there is no Secretary of State for England.
For England,
Which kind of underlines the fact that
you're all
the
part
rest are colonised.
Yes, I mean, originally it was the United Kingdoms of Scotland, of England, Scotland. The Wales and Northern Ireland were a province, and what was the other one? Principality, which one of the states has changed. But no, it's quite clear. It comes from Professor Black again. He laid it out clearly as to why that's the case. And even the Secretary of State of Scotland, it took over 100 years after the 1707 Act before there was a Secretary of State for Scotland. First it was a Secretary about 100 years later, and a wee bit, in fact it might even be a few hundred years later, we got a Secretary of State. So no, it's very much an afterthought, and as Daniel Defoe said, we'll give the jocks a couple of seats and we'll get them down there, but basically we'll just laugh at them. Because they've got power, they've got no power, and we have been catched, as that man famously said. But just on that, this numpty, the Secretary of State for Scotland, you mentioned there. Do you see what he's done? We're going to talk about that, but
we'll talk about that later. You can leave it.
No worries. Well, I'll leave it to then. Crack on.
That's good of you, sir. And while all this is going on, I mean, the thing is, Eva, everyone should know out there, if you're voting for the British Labour Party, oblique English equals British, the British Liberal Party, the British Conservative and Unionist Party, or the massively English nationalist British Reform, you are not voting, you're voting for foreign parties. But here's the latest, popular kid on the block, Reform, which is the in thing. They wanted rid of the Tories and went to Labour, found that's a mistake. Now they're going for Reform. They have announced they will never allow a second independence referendum to take place if they're in power in Westminster. But people, still Scots people, not just English people, a lot of Scots people say, well, we're not a colony. Well, if we're not a colony, how dare an English politician tell us what we can and cannot have?
It's interesting, isn't it? Would not allow, as if it's in their gift to decide whether or not the people of Scotland can become free. The people of Scotland will decide. And the people of Scotland want to be free. We know that a majority support independence, and we also know that support increases when there's a general election and a date on the horizon. So all that we've got to do in Liberate Scotland and in the movement generally is to show Reform a clean pair of heels, because the hard fact of the matter is Reform are really not welcome for any other policies. People are voting Reform so far because they're scunnered with the other political parties, none of whom has a vision for making Scotland the country that we know Scotland can be and should be. So the answer for people who are scunnered with politics is to vote for independence. For independence, for example, vote for the ISP, vote for the SNP if your candidate is somebody that you're convinced is in support of independence, vote for anybody that actually is standing to deliver independence. And that's what the 26th Holyrood election can become. We can vote overwhelmingly in favour of independent supporting parties and create a majority of the popular vote for independence and a majority of seats for independence. Because, as Lloyd often says, the only reform Scotland needs is independence. Yeah. Remember, with the Acts of Union, nothing changed for England, as we said earlier, but everything changed for Scotland. And as I said earlier too, we need to change it back again, because we need politicians who will build a country. We need statehood and we need statecraft. We need to transform those institutions which are currently devolved into properly self-governing institutions, and we need to take back control of those that are currently controlled from Westminster or in Whitehall. And the people of Scotland are particularly well set up to just take over our country, because our country is bursting with brains, intelligence, common sense. Now, you wouldn't think that sometimes when you're watching, for example, First Minister's Questions in Holyrood, but there are a lot brighter people outside Holyrood trying to batter the doors down to get in and take over than are currently sitting in there at the moment, with an honourable half a dozen or so exceptions. But when the constitutional question is off the table, because it's been decided democratically and Scotland has chosen independence, when we no longer have to argue about the constitution, the greatest and the best, the good and the great, everybody in the country will have one common aim, one common denominator, one common goal, and that's the betterment of our country for the sake of the people who live here, and because we can play on the world stage our role as a peaceable, peace-loving nation of diplomats, of singers, of poets, of writers, of historians, of lecturers, of explorers, of inventors. That's who we are. We are the Scots. We're world-renowned because of this kind of race, the kind of nation that we are. Welcoming, peaceable, peace-loving, democratic diplomats. That's us.
Here it is. We don't start fights, we finish them. You should have also mentioned Sovereignty, another pro-independence party and a part of the Liberate Scotland group. Support them. They're up in the Highlands and Islands mainly, but down in some of the Central Belt as well. Sovereignty are for independence, like the rest of us. Alan, the Reform Party, with zero representation apart from one councillor in Glasgow, telling us we cannot have an independence referendum. And if they're in power, you'll not get it, Jocko's back in your box. Enough to get the hackles up, eh?
Aye. Who's going to stop us? Bring it on and bring your da, because you'll need them. Nobody tells the Scottish people what they can and cannot do, except for the people of Scotland. Now, Reform are not as strong as what they believe they are. They are getting seats simply because people are not coming out to vote. It's not that they're getting massive votes. People are just not coming out to vote, and they're getting in by default. But even looking at the ones who have been elected down in England, Reform is costing local authorities hundreds of thousands of pounds because they're having to run by-elections because half their candidates are resigning. They didn't want to be councillors in the first place. They put their name down as paper candidates. But because people didn't come out to vote, they all got in through the back door, and they crapped themselves because they know they cannot deliver what they claim they're going to deliver. I mean, when have you ever seen a local authority who has responsibility for the votes? I served on a local authority, and I'll tell you, it never come across my desk once. Reform just promise the earth. They have no way of delivering it. They did it when they were UKIP. They did it when they were there've been so many different parties going right throughout, but they are the same party. I mean, if you go back far enough, I'm sure they'll be under the Nazis. But the Reform really isn't an issue for Scotland unless the people of Scotland do not come out to vote. Now, I could understand at the last election, for the general election, many people not having someone who they think was suitable for them to vote for. You do not have that problem anymore. There is a new player in the game. Liberate Scotland is now in this to win it. To win it, not to become MSPs, but to win it for Scotland, to get independence. And we are bringing other parties together. The ISP, Sovereignty Party. I mean, at this present time, we have announced 16 candidates. We will be announcing more candidates on Monday and more as the time goes by. We are serious in this. People now have a home. If their belief is in independence, you have a political home, and it is Liberate Scotland. Because Liberate Scotland, bringing people back out to vote, are the only ones who can defeat the Reform Party.
Here, here. Yeah, and people keep approaching us and commenting us, and keep coming, folks, because we're looking for workers, campaigners, canvassers. We're looking for people all over Scotland. This has got to be a unified cause by all of us. We can talk about it. We can lay out the path. Liberate Scotland can give you the opportunity, but you all have to participate. It can't be done by just a handful of people. And it really needs to be done, because just before Starmer announced his deal with the EU, Lloyd, John was laying out to Keir Starmer he must drop his ideological red lines and use the summit with the EU to negotiate the closest possible working relationship with the EU. And John, the Scottish Government stand ready to work with the UK. Liberate Scotland won't, they'll work against them and take them. And the EU towards stability, but the government must reflect the interests of Scotland in the upcoming talks. Well, they didn't exactly do that, did they? They sold the Scottish fishermen right down the river without even so much as a buy your leave to any of the devolved, but certainly not to Scotland on fishing.
Yeah. Take this as a slightly different scenario. So John wants us to be considered any discussions that there will be with the European Union, but abandoned that idea when Angus Robertson said this has got nothing to do with our fishing industry because trade is a reserved matter, right? And fishing comes under trade. So despite the fact that it's devolved, that we have defined maritime waters and we have defined maritime responsibilities in international law, which is why we have 3 maritime protection vessels which are under the control of the First Minister. But when it actually comes to the application of those ideas for our people, it's something else. Trade belongs to Britain. We have the responsibility for the regulation of fishing, but fishing, immediately it becomes trade, is no longer the responsibility of the Scottish Government. Here's a scenario. On the first day of this agreement that Starmer has made with the European Union, and the Polish and French and Spanish fishing boats head towards our waters, I would suggest that the only way to get yourself as a country to those discussions that you want to be at, John, is deploy the Herta, the Mina and the Jura, our maritime protection vessels. Take a leaf out of the Book of Iceland from 1976. Take a leaf out of those who stood up for their people, their country, and for their industry. Now, some would say that this would be a provocation. Good. Some would say that this would be undiplomatic. Good. Because what the Scottish National Party under John Swinney between 2001 and 2007, and what happened with John Swinney and his current leadership of the Scottish National Party is they roll over and get their belly tickled. It's as simple as that. And what the people don't like is when you have an opportunity to stand up against injustice. And let's face straightforward facts. The fact that the British negotiated above and beyond the Scottish Government, when it's a Scottish Government responsibility, that is an insult to our people. And the way to, I would suggest, to redress that is for John to apply the little power he has, even if it was a gesture, to send out the maritime protection vessels and stop, or indeed question, each and every one of the EU fishing boats that come into our seas would be seen to be standing up for Scotland. And if I remember correctly, was that not indeed a campaign slogan of the Scottish National Party on a number of occasions? SNP standing up for Scotland. Well, what we've seen now is we've seen the SNP bow down for Scotland. And it's absolutely pathetic. Genuinely, what would Alex Salmond's response to this have been? A man who understood the power of the gesture. He understood the power of good governance even more, but the power of the gesture. Do you think for 1 minute that given this current circumstances where effectively Britain has said, stay in your box, jocks, that Alec wouldn't do exactly that? Send out the Jura, the Hirta and the Mina out into our fishing grounds and prevent effectively the theft of our natural resources. Our natural resources, again, given away by the Westminster government without any reference to us whatsoever. John, do the country a favour. Do yourself a favour. Give us our respect back again by not accepting this imposition from above, and use what you have to reject that imposition from above. And what you have is you've got your own little navy. And another reminder, when Iceland decided to take on the might of the Royal Navy had over 240 ships. It now has 31. How many ships did the Icelandic Navy have? 3. How many ships have we got, John? 3.
Yeah, it just sums up, though, isn't it, Phil? The British go, or the English go and negotiate a Brexit, a new Brexit deal with the EU, and they just ignore what Scotland's. I've seen so many of these metropolitans. Oh well, you'll be selling more of your shellfish, really. 10,000 jobs, or maybe not a lot in mass of England. 10,000 fishing jobs in Scotland is a huge amount of jobs, and totally disregarded by the British.
Oh, absolutely, completely. And Lloyd's 100% correct. When I was working at Statoil, a colleague from Iceland, Bjarni Stephenson, he told me the tale of his father while we were eating rancid shark and Black Death, which is a hell of a concoction from Iceland. They bury a shark in the sand, let it, it doesn't, you don't want to know. But anyway, Bjarni's dad was in a fishing boat and was rowing out, not a fishing boat, a rowing boat, and went out with his shotgun to shoot at the boats, the fishing boats. And that's what we need. But John Spinney Swinney will do nothing that requires a spine to operate. There must be something, in the small print that allows us to stay this access, or at least disrupt it as much as we could. And again, that's what Alex would do. That's what a true Scot would do. That's what someone who's fighting for the rights of the Scottish people would do. This deal that's been cut, it's about food and agricultural trade, the sanitary and phytosanitary agreement. It's to eliminate a lot of the red tape and paperwork that previously hampered food and drink exports and imports. So it should hopefully lower prices and allow more exports. They talk about an economic boost and steel industry protections. What steel industry? Emissions trading link, whatever. But the big one is the fishing rights. It's a 12-year reciprocal access deal, and the agreement grants EU fishing vessels continued access to UK waters for 12 years. Now, since 66% of the fish and sea area and fish by landings comes from the Scottish waters, then we lose that. We lose that. It doesn't come to Scottish ports, or it's just a nonsense. And this is in exchange for improved UK food export terms. Now, this is a longer period than the UK government really wanted, and it reduces the leverage for the UK in future negotiations. But they don't care about our resources, so long as it gives them benefits elsewhere, such as travel and citizens' rights, e-gates for UK travels as part of it, pet passports, defence and security cooperation as part of it with a joint procurement and defence fund. There's the youth mobility scheme, there's the preliminary framework for that, economic and trade deals, so the volumes and exports have been adjusted. The service trade, again to the EU, it will continue to improve. So basically it helps England and Britain, but it doesn't help Scotland. Really, not very much. We lose more than we win, which is the usual. And there's been lots of political reactions to this, but there's no return for free movement. That's not changed. So as far as I'm concerned, it's just another sellout by the Brits. What did we expect?
If I'm not mistaken, Phil, also just the foreign fishing boats from the EU will have to buy a licence or pay for the privilege of doing that. That money is going to go straight into the Westminster Treasury. It's not going into Scotland, is it? Am I right?
Yeah, I believe so. That's the problem here. It's like it's as
Double
articulated by
whammy.
Lloyd earlier. Exactly. Screwed again. What's new?
Yeah. And while we're talking about that, we're slightly bit, Phil got ahead of the gun a bit earlier, Eva, but this week as well, our Governor General, England's man in Scotland, Ian Murray, without his Union Jack suit on this occasion, Scotland can have the best of both worlds. So the best of both worlds is they make decisions that harm Scotland but improve England. That's the best of the both worlds we've got. Is that what he's trying to tell us here, Eva?
I think I prefer the words of another preeminent lawyer turned politician, Winnie Ewing. Stop the world, Scotland wants to get on. Scotland will never get on the world with devolution because Scotland's not in charge. As we've already clarified, Scotland was the subject of a takeover and not a friendly one at that. So, again, echoing Professor Robert Black's opinion, it's for other people to interpret exactly what he meant and how we go about regaining our self-determination. But we want independence because we want to improve the lot of the people in our country, and because historically we were an independent nation in the past, and we should be again, because Scotland is a country, not a county. So were Alex Salmond with us, he'd be front page news, because I'm quite sure he would be up in Peterhead, speaking to the fisher folk up there, up in the Fraserburgh, up in the Broch, speaking to the people who were ably represented for decades in Europe by Winnie Ewing. It was her existence as a Euro MP for Scotland for the Highlands and Islands that brought European funding to the Highlands and Islands over and over and over again, and built roads and infrastructure and facilities that the people there welcomed with open arms, because she was a true fighter for her people. You know, she would look upon John Swinney's conduct during the week with utter disdain, I'm sure, because what he actually said in his press release was, the First Minister met Sir Keir Starmer today. They discussed the importance of tackling child poverty, addressing the cost of living crisis by growing the economy, and international relations. When Britain's participating in selling arms, operating in illegal wars, and he's speaking to him about international relations, child poverty, the economy. Why have we got austerity? Because we're ruled by remote control from Westminster, and Ian Murray is the mouthpiece. So John Swinney shouldn't be down or in Edinburgh, wherever the heck he was, speaking to Keir Starmer. He should be on the streets speaking to his own people and listening to what they want. You know, there was no discussion, as far as we're aware, of Grangemouth, for example. Grangemouth just slipped off the agenda. It's not mentioned anymore. It's shut. It's gone. Is that it? Is it finished? So no Grangemouth. Bedroom tax? Nope, not mentioned. Two-child rape clause? Not mentioned. You know, waspy women in Scotland? Not mentioned. Immigration? Not mentioned. All of these areas of life that we need to control in Scotland, for Scotland, by Scotland. These are the things that John Swinney should be concentrating on. These are all the areas that we suffer in as the result of Westminster rule. Weapons of mass destruction on the Clyde, bairns not bombs. Which is it? Because with United Kingdom government, it's bombs not bairns every time. There's always money for war. That's the state that we want out of. It's a rotten state, and it's one that our nation needs to leave. PDQ.
Absolutely. It's just another insult to the people of Scotland and to any unionist watching, Alan. Will they waken up and see with the way we're treated, that we're just treated with disdain? You're not an equal partner. We're very much a colonised nation.
Yeah, I mean, unionists have to waken up to the lies that they're consistently told. I mean, they were told, leave Brexit. The fishermen were told Europe would have nothing to do with your fishing fleet again. They've now just been sold out. But the best of both worlds that he's talking about is that because we're being sold out by Westminster, but we're also being sold out by the Scottish Parliament. Because we've got Westminster selling us out to Europe, and the Scottish Parliament selling us out to corporate slavery and corporate vandalism. I mean, we've got the Scottish Parliament giving planning permission to Loch Lomond to Flamingo Land in Loch Lomond.
Mm.
A massive vandalism of our estates, of our land, because the land doesn't belong to the Parliament to sell, it belongs to us. Now, the SNP are saying that they have gone through the process of this. This planning application was rejected by 150,000 people. Those included environmental groups, SEPA, and the National Parks Authority. All objected. The planning reporter did his report and suggested that it be granted on the condition of 40 legal requirements being met. Now, if there's 40 legal requirements needing to be met, it doesn't follow the planning legislation. It should have been rejected. But Ivan McKeever has the authority as the planning minister to pull that in and deny the planning permission. That's all he has to do, is bring it in and deny it. But he's refusing to do that. He is turning his back on Scotland. And Scotland has to stand up for this and stop the Loch Lomond development. And if everybody please get in touch with the Stop Loch Lomond Facebook page. They're doing a great job. But coming back on to Murray, I mean, he goes on best of both worlds. Again, that best of both worlds got us austerity. It got us the bedroom tax. It got us the two-child rape clause. It got us food banks. It's got us into illegal wars. It's got us into a position where we're spending billions of pounds funding other wars and supporting a genocide abroad. If you really want the best of both worlds, then you vote independence on the constituency ballot and independence on the list ballot. That's the best of both worlds.
Yeah. We've heard this so often from unionist politicians, Lloyd, isn't it? The best of both worlds. There is no best. The best of the world for us as Scots is to make our own decisions, good and bad. And we will get some wrong, let's be honest. But that is the best way to do it. Make your own decisions, make your own mistakes, as you do in your everyday life.
Yes, absolutely. We don't need a filter. Scotland doesn't need a filter. Westminster is a filter. Being part of the United Kingdom is a filter. Our future does lie in two worlds. And those two worlds are an independent Scotland operating in a world stage as a member of the United Nations, with the ability for our young people to travel and educate themselves and work anywhere else in the world that they wish, without the filter or the choices of a British government and what a British government does. You know, the purpose and function of the creation of independence is so that our country and our people can have a relationship with other countries and other peoples based on our desires, our requirements, our values, not the values of those who will fly spy flights on behalf of the Israeli genocidal government. It is not the values that has provided parts for the Israeli government's F-35 fighters that are destroying and killing innocent children and women every single day in occupied Palestine. These are not the values of the Scottish people. The two worlds that Ian Murray talks about, or rather the best of both worlds that Ian Murray talks about, is what's best for Ian Murray. When it comes down to it, what we're seeing here is what I witnessed for 40, 50 odd years. A corrupt, self-centred Labour Party controlling and dominating the country and the people of Scotland, who got knocked out of power for a little while, primarily because of their own incompetence, and not their incompetence in government, but their failure to see what was coming over the horizon at them. What Ian Murray wants is he wants to go back to the 70s and the 80s, when Britain was run by the Tories and Scotland was run by the Red Tories of the Labour Party. That's the two worlds that Ian Murray's talking about, and it's all about that horrible bureaucracy that is the Labour Party in Scotland. It's anti-Scottish, it's anti-working class, and it is entirely and completely self-centred. And Ian Murray, in some ways, is the perfect poster boy for what the Labour Party in Scotland is. And that is an organisation focused on its own preservation. The tragedy is that parallel to that, just at this moment, we have the SNP under John Swinney trying to replicate that, to make itself the bureaucracy that runs Scotland, not for the benefit of the people, but for the benefit of the party. Doing exactly what John said in a party group meeting in 2002, just after he was elected leader, and I was a member of the parliamentary group. John said, and I quote, "I want the Scottish National Party to be even better than Tony Blair's New Labour. We have to become New Labour." Those are the words of the current First Minister of Scotland. If you want to see them written down, then get a hold of Campbell Martin's book. Was it something that I said? Campbell Martin was the secretary to the parliamentary group and has all the information you need to know about the politics of our current First Minister. And the politics of our current First Minister are the politics of Ian Murray.
Yeah, absolutely. Here's another thing, talking on, the best of both worlds and how great they are. Now, the Labour Party assured us that they would save Grangemouth. As we know, they didn't. But don't worry, they said. We're going to give you £200 million, Phil, to, make good this. And what did we find out? Not a single penny. Nothing has materialised. It was, again, just a throwaway comment, much like surgeons I can exclusively reveal today. The Labour Party, I can exclusively reveal today, reneged again. Quelle surprise.
Yeah, Sturgeon's energy company for Scotland. Pretty much every decent initiative for energy that the UK's come up with, other than selling it out to the corporations. So, Energy Voice, a publication for the energy industry, reported that Shanks admits, as you put up, not a penny of the UK government's 200 million promised has been delivered. Now, this was Keir Starmer, who said in February 200 million from the National Wealth Fund would be allocated for investment in Grangemouth. Now, the UK Energy Minister, as you put up there, Michael Shanks, has admitted to a Scottish Parliament committee that not a single penny of the UK government's proposed 200 million investment in Grangemouth has been released, or was released. Pressed by SNP's MSP Gordon MacDonald on the status of the funding, Shanks conceded that no money will be released until there is a viable investment proposition on the table. Aye, right. A clear admission that the much-lauded 200 million figure remains entirely undelivered. So in February, Keir Starmer had said we will allocate 200 million from the National Wealth Fund for investment in Grangemouth, and that's the difference a Labour government can make. Well, this is the best of two worlds. This is the best of both worlds. You were talking about Ian Murray, you liar, you complete liar. But just 3 months later, Grangemouth refinery shut down and no money materialised. Why did it not materialise? Because they lied to us again. They had no intention of ever even trying to save Grangemouth. Simple as that.
Yeah. Eva, I know how close the Grangemouth refinery was to your heart, how hard you fought in your campaign in July and how much it means to you. But when you hear that they reneged even on the 200 million they promised, it must have really got your hackles up.
Well, it's entirely as predicted, isn't it? We knew this would happen. There's no surprises
sadly
there whatsoever. And, if John Swinney was talking to Keir Starmer the other day about child poverty, he need look no further than Grangemouth, Falkirk, Stirling, Clackmannanshire. Right across the central belt of Scotland, there are children living in poverty unnecessarily. And his failure, so that's John Swinney's failure and Keir Starmer's failure, and the failure of the local MP who beat me, Brian Leishman, who promised that voting Labour would save Grangemouth. All these people have to look at themselves in the mirror in the morning and remember that it's they and their decisions and their lack of action that has took us to where we are. I've asked Brian Leishman repeatedly to confirm who it was that promised him in the Labour Party that Labour would keep that refinery open, and he's not answered me, and I'm challenging him again to tell me who it was in the Labour Party that said they'd keep the refinery open. Put up, Brian, put up or shut up, because quite honestly, you're bleating on Twitter, on social media all the time about how you gave your word that it would be saved and that the Labour Party let you down. Well, who let you down? Who was it? because you're the one that should be answerable to the people that voted for you. There are people that worked at Grangemouth that gave you their votes because you said the refinery would stay open. You made that promise. So you need to own up and grass off who it was that lied to you. I'm not accusing you of lying, but I want to know who it was that told you it would stay open and on whose word you gave your word. Because it's embarrassing for you otherwise, and mark my words, it will come back to haunt you, because when I stand for the Scottish Parliament next year, I'll be reminding everybody that the Labour Party, that's the Unionist Labour Party, their word is not to be trusted because they lied about Grangemouth, okay? So you better get your press release ready for next year. No, this is absolutely appalling behaviour. There's money flying out of Westminster daily that pours into Westminster from Scotland, and it goes abroad. It goes into the pockets and the wallets and the bank accounts of those people that have got more money than common sense, and certainly there's not a philanthropist among them down there. So what ought to be happening is the people of Scotland should be phoning, emailing, chapping the doors off all of their elected representatives and demanding answers and investment, proper investment, so that Scotland does not become an industrial wasteland, so that Scotland does not become a desert, so that we can again compete on the world stage as the inventors, the thinkers, the doers, the creators that we know we are.
Indeed. We can send money to Ukraine to help that regime there. We can send money to Israel to allow them free use of our Royal Air Force. We can send money everywhere, but we can't spend it on the things they promised to the workers of Scotland, because we don't count, folks. And until you wise up on that, they don't care. They don't care one bit. But on that, the clock's beating us as always, Alan. Here's another one. Suddenly. Now, again, you've got to read between the lines. Keir Starmer's now saying it's a U-turn on the winter fuel payments. But actually, when you look at that, there's all sorts of caveats to that. But, why is it okay now, but before they told us it was vital, it would burst the economy if they paid the winter fuel economy? They cannot tell the truth. They don't even lie straight in bed.
I mean, it's just that they're changing their mind on this on paper, like they've done in many other times, because elections are coming up. They were given a real hiding at the last elections there, and they got frightened. So they're now saying that they will look at this policy again. They're not going to change it yet. They are going to look at this again. They're maybe going to increase the level of entitlements. So what will that be? The inflation of the pension increases for this year to next year, so it'll be the same people who are getting it. Or will they just, after the election is all over and done with in Scotland, and they hope to get someplace, they'll decide, oh, well, actually, we're not going to do that again because the economy's went off the rails again, so we've got to tighten our belts again. Labour promised the earth and deliver nothing but dog shit. That's just a fact with Labour. They promise you the earth and hope that you will just soak it in. And unfortunately, many people have over many years. We've now got to take a stance and look at what the politicians are doing, not what they are saying. Look at their past and the promises that they have made in the past and what they have not kept. Westminster are not interested in pensioners who are freezing in Scotland. They're not interested in bairns who are going to school hungry in Scotland. Because what do? They say, oh, that's the Scottish Parliament's problem. They've got the policy powers for that. Yeah, we do have the policy powers for it. We do not have the financial backing for that, because you have our money down in Westminster that you are using to subsidise your policies of illegal wars and supporting of genocide. So give us our money back and we will deal with the problems of Scotland. And we will make sure that our pensioners are not freezing, and we will make sure our children are not starving. We will prioritise the people of Scotland, not your little vendettas against other people. So give us the powers, give us our independence. And like I said earlier on, we are Liberate Scotland, and we will be free.
Indeed we will. The clock kicking on, but this week as well, Lloyd, this was a really bizarre statement. The Scottish Government claimed it would be anti-Semitic to release information about Angus Robertson's secret meeting, well, they're not so secret now, are they, with the Israeli ambassador. How is it anti-Semitic to tell us what a paid public servant, because that's what he is, we pay his wages, why would it be anti-Semitic to know how many times he's met with the people from a nation who are in the court in The Hague at the moment, or meant to be?
This is the great hide behind, isn't it? This is the great thing that's being used now to protect Israel, to the point where we even have civil servants in from the Scottish government providing that excuse, and that's all it is. It's an excuse to a freedom of information request. It tells us very clearly that we need a Scottish civil service. We do not need a pro-Israeli British civil service running our country. I've believed this for many years, but you know what essentially is here. The Scottish government, Angus Robertson and particularly John Swinney, do not want the country to know the extent of their connections to Israel and its offshoots. That's what this is about. It's a stalling exercise. That hopefully it's a ruse that this Scottish government learned under Nicola Sturgeon and has honed under John Swinney, which is to prevent information getting into the public by means of the rejection of freedom of information requests. The number of requests which have been rejected by the Scottish government and then overturned by the Information Commissioner, you know, is now in 3 figures. But this is it's a stalling tactic. But what is it stalling for? It's stalling to prevent coming into the public domain the fact that John Swinney met with Eden River, which is an Israeli illegal settler organization who had some economic involvement in Scotland, and as a result of the boycott campaign, went to the Scottish government and said that they were losing money. So John Swinney gave them £200,000 directly. John Swinney gave to an Israeli settler organisation, illegal settler organisation called Eden River, £200,000. That was when he was Finance Secretary. Just after that, when he became Education Secretary, he instructed that all teaching materials that were not pro-Palestinian, but which were provided by Palestinian organisations made up of Scots, not of Palestinians, provided into our schools to balance the curriculum. He demanded the removal of all of those educational materials. So our children were not to be told the truth of the history of the Holy Land, as John frequently refers to it. Now, I did add into that the number of occasions in which Angus Robertson, that very well-known Zionist, has had meetings with various members of the Israeli embassy staff. All of that will come out if we don't accept this description of trying to find out anything about Israel as anti-Semitic. Yeah, no, really. We'll discover that Angus has made promises to the assistant ambassador, but what we would also discover is that there's a huge amount of communications traffic between the Scottish Civil Service and the Scotland desk of the Israeli embassy. Yes, you heard correctly. There is a desk operated by a staff of 7, I believe, in the embassy, in London, the Israeli embassy, whose focus is entirely on Scotland. And the reason for this is because Scotland historically, starting with the Church of Scotland, has stood foursquare against the further extension of the Israeli state and its committing of war crimes. And this is historical. It's 50, 60 years worth. But what we will discover when these freedom of information requests are eventually, and they will be, eventually complied with, is that certainly our First Minister, certainly our Foreign Affairs spokesman, as is Angus Robertson, have a cosier relationship with the Israeli government than they do with the people of Scotland. That's
disgraceful. And on that, at the start of the week, Phil, Keir Starmer says UK stands with Israel. Don't speak for me. I am a UK citizen. I do not stand with Israel. Anyone who wants to arm it is what's been said, followed up by Friday. Keir Starmer was getting called a pro-Hamas by Netanyahu because they had questioned some of the actions of the Israeli government in Gaza. It's just what what Lloyd's talking about, Phil. You can't criticise them in any way, shape or form. You immediately become pro-Hamas or a Jew hater or a Holocaust denier. And they've even done it to Keir Starmer, who's given them free use of the Royal Air Force. You can't deal with people like that.
No, you can't trust Starmer, and it will be very interesting to know what's really going on with this. What there was a fascinating story about some young Ukrainian lad who was looking for his apparently was running away from the war, and there was an accusation. Somebody made an accusation to quite a dramatic accusation that this guy was a rent boy, and staggering, of course, was Keir Starmer says, of course not. That's not the case. This is just a young man, a young guy that was seeking escape from this war in Britain that I ended up playing cards with. How absurd a story like that, and how absurd a statement can that be? I mean, these are allegations by others, I hasten to add, and they are reported. And I'm looking at this and thinking, what really lies behind all of these actions or inactions by politicians? And if you understand how the black arts work, if you understand how politics works, you understand that leverage over a politician is everything. And it's still, you should know this. There's three things I've said quite often that I know that Nicola Sturgeon was being blackmailed over that I know about. Okay? What do MI5 know? Once I've got their claws into you, you will do as you are told. Keir Starmer is doing as he is told. These people are doing as they are told. You cannot trust them. The truth must out, and it takes the courage of people like Craig Murray to stand up to this evil. Evil is being done in our name by organisations that do what they're told, by the people that pay their wages, and they use blackmail, and they use bribery, and they use every means at their disposal, which is pretty much they can execute anybody they want. That's what we're up against here. So don't underestimate it. And this is why I cannot conscience petty tribalism in this movement. There is no room for it. Who the hell do you think you are? We stand for the people of Scotland and a unification programme that means everything. It means our future. It means standing up for what's right and standing up for your own. And we must understand what we face. So if you allow yourself to be played by a very sophisticated and far-reaching and ruthless system, there will be pain. We will not go unscarred. Look at Willie McRae, look at Craig Murray. There's a price to be paid here. Are you willing to stand up and be counted, friends? That's the question.
I just wonder what card game that young man was playing cards. I wonder if it was Happy Families or Strip Jack Naked. I really don't know. I wonder what they were doing. I wonder what
Donkey.
I really don't know. Allegedly. Last thing to you, Eva. This is quite a thing. Was this week the Greens announced that they have abandoned gender quotas for election candidates in the wake of the Supreme Court ruling on the definition of women. The SNP are still silent on that, but wow, I was surprised to hear the Greens were actually going to, observe the law.
I don't know what to say. I mean, there's really no answer to that, is there? What I did like about the Greens is that apparently Patrick Harvey is being challenged by Ellie Gomersall. Ellie wants to be top of the Glasgow list for the Greens, but you'll remember that Ellie says he's trans. So it'll be interesting to see how that one goes. But yeah, that was a turn up for the books. It's maybe because they now understand how stupid they've been all these years pursuing this self-identification policy. But there's a terribly sad side to this as well, because this is going to cost, this whole fiasco is going to cost the Scottish Government and its institutions a heck of an amount of money in compensation. J.K. Rowling is created a fund for people to tap into for money to make discrimination claims and the like, compensation claims because of all this misgendering nonsense. So there will be pupils from schools, students from universities, women from women's aid refuges, people in hospital wards, prison officers, police officers. All these people will have claims for compensation arising from the unlawful implementation of self-identification by these institutions, inculcated by Nicola Sturgeon, acquiesced in by Keith Brown, and positively encouraged, unfortunately, in recent years by Humza Yousaf and John Swinney. They should be made personally liable. They should be bankrupted as the result of this. But they won't. They'll be laughing all the way to the bank. And it's the rest of us, the taxpayers, that'll be footing the bill.
Correct.
Hell in them.
Exactly. And on that, lastly, Alan, Sandy Peggy, the famous nurse who's, of course, fighting a tribunal, she announced this week she's going to be suing her own union, the Royal College of Nursing, because they refused to help her and abandoned her and sort of backed the illegal acts that were happening against the women. The unions are also in trouble as well.
Well, it shows that the union, just like the Labour Party, are not what they were set up to be.
No.
The unions have deserted the workers, and they did so going back to 97 when Blair took over. He changed the way the unions were. It used to be a case where the unions went in and made demands to the Labour Prime Minister. But at 97 come along with Blair, they were all going in there, bowing their knee and saying, where could we get on this greasy pole? Because we all want a wee bit of the la-la. That's all they were interested in. But I mean, who would have believed that in 2025 we would have a trade union being taken to court because it was not defending one of their members' equality? We fought for long and hard, both women and men, to get the equality into the employment legislation. It's not a hard thing to do. You've got the law and you've got fantasy. Unfortunately, the unions have gone down the road of fantasy. And like Eva said, it's going to cost us a fortune. I think where the Greens have maybe changed is because although they've got a lot of activists who are lalas, don't know the difference between a man and a woman, a lot of their funders do. And their funders know that the money they're given for environmental issues will be used up on court cases, fighting the woke stuff. And that's not what they're donating for. That's not what they're members of the Green Party for. So hopefully the Greens are actually taking back control of their party, the real Greens, and getting rid of the lalas, because they have got to go. And they've got to go right throughout the board, right out of Scottish politics altogether. I mean, there's a party already set up for them. They don't have to interfere with other ones. They're a raving lunatic party. It's already set there. It's one of the oldest parties going. So go and join it. Be at home.
I tell you that's they're also discovered in the last few weeks their independence routes. They haven't said anything since the last Holyrood election, but suddenly now they're all up for independence. The Greens, aye, good. But ladies and gentlemen, if you want true independentistas and you want independence, Liberate Scotland is full of patriots who will not have a party whip, who are only there. They're going to stand in one thing and one thing only. Independence, nothing less. Independence, nothing else. Liberate Scotland, and let's all liberate Scotland together. Till we see you again. Take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.